Hello everyone, welcome back to the class. So for this week, we are going to watch another movie by the same director Wang Kar-wai. So if you still remember, the first movie we saw in this course is titled In the Mood for Love, which is also directed by Wang Kar-wai. And this week, actually, we are going to continue the theme of love in daily encounters. So sort of connected to last week's reading, 6 Records of a Life Drift, because that is also about the very trivial things in daily life that can generate love and will bring trouble to your love relationship and also will change your idea about what is love. So this movie too, so it will show us basically your daily encounter with a stranger or with your best friend can generate love or can disturb your idea about what is love. So the movie we are going to watch is titled Chungking Express. It's a pretty interesting title and I will explain it later. And I put it here, one of the female characters' picture, so on the left. And it's a comedy in a way, but also not a typical kind of movie. So this movie is shot in 1994, and director, as I said, is Wang Kar-wai, who is the same director of In the Mood for Love. And one fun fact of this movie is that it is made during Wang Kar-wai's making another movie titled Ashes of Time. And that movie is pretty much very different from this one. That movie is based on a martial art novel and try to kind of construct and deconstruct a huge discourse about martial arts. So very, very different. As Wang Kar-wai himself said, while I had nothing to do, I decided to make Chungking Express following my instincts. After the very heavy stuff, heavily emphasized in Ashes of Time, I wanted to make a very light contemporary movie, but where the characters had the same problems. So basically, this movie, Chungking Express, is defined by the director as a very light contemporary movie. That kind of says a lot about the overall setting and the overall atmosphere of this movie. As you can see on the movie poster here on the right, so there's a lot of fragments from different scenes put it together, make it a poster. That kind of basically describes the core kind of traits of this whole movie is being very fragmental, and just bits by bits, you kind of you put every puzzle together to make up a story, and a very contemporary story and a very lightweight story and a comedy-ish story. So a little bit about the title. So Chongqing is actually a mansion in the Tsui, Hong Kong. So as I put it here on the top, you'll see that is the actual mansion in Hong Kong. That is a very interesting place. So currently, this mansion is still there, and you can find a lot of different people from all over the world kind of gather together there. It is not a very high-class place, but more like a habitat for all those immigrants of Hong Kong, and especially the Indians. You will find very good Indian restaurants and some a little bit creepy kind of lounging there as well. I have been to this mansion several years ago. That feeling is exactly like what you will see in the movie. So very dim light and very narrow passages, and you bump into people from all over the world, especially those Indians. And they have their own culture, they speak their own language, but they can also speak Cantonese. So very complicated kind of space. And for the express, that is the food stand Midnight Express in also in central Hong Kong. So I also put a picture here. So on the bottom, you will see that used to be a real place selling nighttime snack in a broader sense, to people in Hong Kong. So that is the food stand we'll see in the movie. Nowadays, this stand unfortunately do not exist anymore. There's a convenience store in place of that, but that place that location is still there. And if you go back to the original Chinese title, that is called Chungking Senlin, a little bit different. The same Chongqing, so the mansion, but instead of saying express referring to the food stand, here in the Chinese title they refer to forest, which is a concrete forest in the city. So I put another picture here on the bottom. So that is what you will normally see when you go to that area of Hong Kong. So when you look at the sky, the building is so tall and the sky will be divided into bits by bits. So that kind of idea of you are surrounded by all the great buildings, all the tall buildings, and you are like going into a forest, that kind of idea. So basically, you can sense from the title, this is a movie about the intersection of different culture and different ethnics, of different people from the world. That's one thing. And second, this is a movie dedicated to Hong Kong as a city. So we can say this is a movie for love in a city. So not a fallen city, but a modern city, a contemporary city just like the one we experienced every day. So if you pay attention to the voiceover, the first sentence of the voiceover of the movie is that every day we brush past so many other people we may never meet, or people who may become close friends. So that kind of idea of brush past so many people, and the majority of them are strangers, is one of the most interesting and significant feature of living in a city. And that is what actually I think capture the overall idea and overall theme of this movie. And I will spoil it a little bit. So you see I pasted 3 screenshot here. That is when characters, different characters in the movie consciously or unconsciously bump into each other. So they may notice they are meeting someone, or they just accidentally shot in the same frame with another character. But nonetheless, they met. So that idea of you are going to meet so many different people in different ways in the city every day, that is very important. And that kind of brings up to the idea of the 0.01 centimeter distance. So basically, you are bumping into so many people in a city. Sometimes you are so close to the degree of, as Wang Gawei described, to the degree of you are only 0.01 centimeters distance away from that person. But there's still a distance. So even if you met another person, but the distance, especially living in a city, is still there, can you actually fall in love with that person? Can you actually make up for the distance and get actual contact with that person? I think that is an internal question kind of remains and being asked again and again throughout this movie. So basically, that pointed out to our modern people one of the biggest issue we always talking about and thinking about: loneliness. What is loneliness? What is love in a city? What is love in a modern city with so many lonely people? And finally, the lovesick and encounters. So we met, we fall in love, and we are going into a very difficult phase, and we are in lovesick. So that kind of different phase of love in a modern city is very much represented in different way in this movie. And I want to give you some background knowledge for that time period and for that specific location, Hong Kong, to prepare you to get into this movie. So the first one is a pager, which is a pretty important tool and in the first story. So this whole movie is we can consider it consists of two stories. So pager is one of the important thing in the first story. This is kind of a out-of-date communication tool. So your generation may not ever heard of that. So basically, it's a wireless telecommunications device that receives and displays alphanumeric. So you cannot go type back, but you can only receive. Receive a series of number or maybe some alphabet, and then you call back to the station and say, I got this number. Is there anyone who looking for me? What's their message? So you need to through a third party to get your information. It's a very, very interesting way of communication in the time without cell phone. So basically, it's a one-way page. You can only receive message. That kind of also represent what we understand communication, even communication in love in a modern city. So we need to through third party to get contact with anyone. And even that contact is one-way contact. Just like our protagonist, you always have one-way emotion, one-way urge to communicate, but you may not get response. So that kind of idea of one-way and delayed communication is what I think symbolizes the communication or the idea about love in a modern time period. And another one I want to draw your attention to is a central mid-level escalator, which is very important for the second story. So I put a screenshot in the first frame. So basically, if from the second and the third frame, you can see it is basically a very long escalator. So the longest outdoor covered escalator system in the world. It covers over 800 meters or 2,600 feet in distance and traverses a elevation of over 135 meters, so 443 feet from bottom to top. So it's like a escalator, yeah, in your image, in your mind, in your imagination, but a outdoor one, and it's very long, can transport you from one place to another. So linking the central part to the Hong Kong island. Very, very long escalator, kind of a weird way of transportation in a modern city. But because of the geographic features of Hong Kong as an island, they made this kind of invention. And so from the first frame I put here, you can see actually people lived very near to the escalator. So they can through their own windows of their apartment to observe what is happening, who is passing by that escalator. Even if people notice this problem, so they have that kind of blurred screen to shelter that visual kind of contact. But still, if you kind of bend down, you can get some eye contact with people living in the apartment next to the escalator. And that is I've been to that escalator as well. So that's a very interesting escalator. You just stand there and it will move forward, and you are seeing the whole Hong Kong just moving underneath your feet. And they have several exits, so you don't need to take the escalator only from the beginning to the end. You can jump out at any point if you want to. There's four stops, so you can jump out at any stop you want to, 4 or 3. So basically, it's a transportation tool, but a pretty gigantic modern machine, and it provides you a very different angle to look at the city. And another thing I want to mention is that if you found this movie difficult to understand or difficult to follow, that is pretty normal. And I will also say that is what the movie targeted at, to make you confused and make you not pay that much attention to the story, to the plot, but to the overall atmosphere. As I said, what is a city? What is a modern city? What will happen if we encounter other strangers in a city? Just as Robert Ebert said, this is the kind of movie you will relate to if you love movie itself, rather than its surface aspects such as story and the stars. So it is not a movie for casual audience, and it may not reveal all its secret the first time through. If you are attentive to the style, if you think about what Wang is doing, Chungking Express works. If you are trying to follow the plot, you may feel frustrated. So he continues to say many of today's younger film goers fed only by the narrow selections at video stores are not as curious or knowledgeable and may simply be puzzled by Chungking Express instead of challenged. It needs to be said in any event that a movie like this is largely a cerebral experience. You enjoyed it because of what you know about film, not because of what it knows about life. I'm not totally agree with the last sentence, but I think he draws our attention to the style itself, which is very important to the representational format of a movie. So thinking about a movie versus a novel, or let's get it simple, a movie versus a story, what will be different? How can that be different? Besides telling us a story like two people falling in love from the beginning to the end, what else can movie this specific way of representation do for us? I think this is what Chungking Express can tell us. If you pay attention to the style, to break it down, like the camera angle, the music, the background music, the performance, or the actual narrative strategies, how to tell a story from different perspective and to put them together but not filling every hole, still leave so many holes for you to use your imagination to fill in, to understand, to challenge your audience, or to draw your audience into this whole making process of telling a story. I think that is what a movie can do. You can consider it as an experiment, but I will say this idea of draw people into making the movie probably also related to the idea of a love movie or a movie about love. Especially those movies about love, they have stronger capacity to do that, to draw other people's feelings, thinkings, and motivations, intentions, all these things into the movie and to make a experimental movie like this. You can compare this idea of using style to make a movie to use style to tell a love experience or to experience love, basically. So love and the movie, I think, in terms of style, they have a lot of similarities. And finally, I want to draw your attention to some interesting contrast in the movie so you can pay attention to them when watching it. So the first one is a God's eye view versus a first-person perspective. So in this movie, basically, we got a God's eye view. We understand every character's intention, their motivation, their background somehow. But characters themselves, as I said, they are, you can consider them as real people living in a modern city. So they only come across each other very shortly, very briefly, very superficially. They only understand very limited about each other. So their kind of response to each other is very much not we will imagine because we got the God's view. So let's thinking about how different perspective will influence our idea of viewing a love relationship. And second is dream versus reality, or to be specific, daydream versus reality. That is especially for the second story, but maybe for the first as well. So especially if you are in a love relationship and you are in the styled love relationship like represented in this movie, how could you define which part is daydream and which part is reality? Or the overall charm of being love, being a styled love, is that you cannot differentiate between dream and reality. And lastly, the old love versus new love. So, a little bit spoiler. So, in this movie, every character has different lovers, the former one, the current one, the future one. So, how to deal with different pieces of love relationships, how to make them connected, and how to maintain being yourself throughout this whole process. I think that is also a very interesting idea when you to keep in mind when watching this movie. So even if, as I said, this movie is a majority of a part of this movie is about style, about the narrative strategy, narrative skill to tell a story, but also we can still learn some life experience from this movie, like how people say goodbye to their loves and how people embrace new loves and why different choices they make different choices and how different choices lead to different endings. I think that is also one part we may find somehow relate to while watching this movie. So that is my short introduction of this movie, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite movie of Wong Kar-wai, and it kind of always every time I watch it, it evokes me to think a lot more. So not only related to my own life experience, but also related to basically the existence of love and the overall idea about love. So I also hope you can enjoy it. And don't forget to leave your comments down below. Let's have an interesting discussion on Thursday. Bye.